Welcome, everybody. I am Amy Maestas, the director of the Collaborative Journalism Research Hub. I'm joining you today from University of Rhode Island in Rhode Island, outside Providence, where we are catalyzing a new collaborative. And so met with the folks yesterday in getting this started. Really excited to see the work that they will do. And we're going to learn today from Holly Edgell how you can gather data from your collaborative partners. Holly will explain how she came here to recognize that she needed this data when she was part of the Hub's collaborative sustainability collaborative when their collaboratives working with Blue Engine. Before we get started, I just really quickly want to share some information with you. Our next monthly webinar, we hold them the last Tuesday of every month. Topics that are relevant to collaboratives will be about how collabinars can work with student journalists. We have several collaboratives in our network where student journalists are involved, whether they are writing stories or working alongside a full-time working journalist, to all kinds of other ways to get involved. So you'll be able to hear from project managers who oversee collaboratives where student journalists are heavily involved. You can sign up for our Eventbrite page, the Center's Eventbrite page, which will have the sign up link probably by the end of next week. If you follow us on Eventbrite, then you will see when those pop up. And you can also keep up to date on our webinar schedule by subscribing to our biweekly newsletter, which is all things collaborative related, in addition to what our upcoming webinars will be. And I just dropped the link to sign up for that in the chat. Today's webinar will be recorded. We will send the recording afterwards, along with Holly's contact information if you have follow-up questions. At the end of her presentation, there will be time for questions. So at that point, when she says that she's ready, if you have a question, you can either raise your hand and Holly will call on you to come off mute to ask, or drop it in the chat. We will be dropping it. Joining me today are my colleagues, Liza Gross, the Hub Senior Advisor, and Joe Amditas, with the Center for Cooperative Media. Now let me introduce Holly. She is the founding managing editor of the Midwest Newsroom. That's a collaborative regional newsroom that does multimedia in-depth news for communities in Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, and Nebraska. Its partners are NPR and NPR member stations across 4 states in that region. She has more than 25 years of experience in journalism across radio, digital, television, and print platforms. And in addition to her newsroom experience, she has taught at the University of Missouri. Oh my gosh, I said Missouri and I didn't even know it because I know some people say that. That is not how I say Missouri. Something to Missouri, and Florida A&M University. She was also a member of the first cohort of Google News lab trainers, and she professionally is a member of the National Association of Black Journalists and Journalism and Women's Symposium. We're really grateful for her to talk about this today. She talked about it at the annual Collaborative Journalism Summit in May at Temple University, and we brought her back to talk more about getting data from your collaborative partners, in her case, to work toward a sustainability plan. I am turning it over now to you, Holly.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully it will be successful. Yes, there it is. So basically, this all started, well, I'm going to tell you more about us. Let me do this. We were founded in 2021, so we just celebrated 5 years of existence. They're our collaboration partners. Originally, we were organized around the idea of providing investigative journalism for radio and digital audiences with our partners and for NPR, and helping our partner stations in their newsrooms build investigative and in-depth reporting capacity. I say original because it has changed, and I will talk about that. One thing I'll say is that I was hired after this was conceived, and if I'd known better, which I went into this with a great deal of enthusiasm and not the right questions probably, I would have asked that we ask for audience data right at the beginning, because that was not something that was provided and I didn't really think to ask for it at the time, which sounds crazy now. But at any rate, I would recommend if you're starting a collaboration, put that in the MOU, get that out there early. Um, our funders are, one bucket of our funding comes from our collaboration partners, and that includes NPR. And then another bucket of funding comes from the Schmid Family Foundation, Wendy and Eric Schmid, via NPR. So the Schmid family supports the Midwest Newsroom as well as several other collaborations in the NPR collaborative journalism network. So the collaborative journalism network now encompasses about 27 states around the country, and like ours, it is made up of member stations that are put together regionally around different organizing principles. Everyone sort of has their own reason for being. Kate, who's here on the webinar, is out of the Appalachia Mid-South, I think it's called, collaboration. We have a seven-member staff, and we're dispersed across the region. So some of us are in St. Louis. We have a person in Des Moines, a person in Lincoln, and a couple people in Kansas City. And we have just gone through a big reorganization. And we have a new organizing principle. Our partners came to us and said, we want more frequent stories on a regular cadence. As you can imagine, investigative journalism doesn't lend itself to a regular cadence. And so we've shifted to investigative journalism through more of an accountability filter, and we've expanded our reporting core, as well as now we are basically calendaring and delivering stories every week. So it's been a big shift. And I mention this because in the process of doing this audience work, there were learnings that are helping on the content side, and that was just a bonus that we didn't know we were going to get. So that was kind of cool. This all started, as Amy said, we were part of the cohort, the first cohort of the Collaborative Sustainability Accelerator. My colleague, Karen Campbell, who is at KCUR, she and I are both employees of KCUR in Kansas City. And she's a smart person who knows about sustainability. And so she was my partner when we applied for this. And KCUR, by the way, is the home station of the Midwest Newsroom. So even though I live in St. Louis, I work for our station in Kansas City. And we were asked to consider a number of sustainability topics through different pillars or different sort of paradigms. And, we really went back to basics and thought, my gosh, we don't know enough about our local partner audiences to speak with confidence about who these folks are and what they care about and what their habits are. And so we decided to, before we could jump to things about fundraising, we felt like we needed to go way back to some very basic issues. And so that was what we started with. And I'm going to take you through kind of the steps that we took to get this information. Once Karen and I figured out its audience data that we needed, we did some pre-work, which I'll talk about. We recognized it was important to find allies who could sell this to our partners. Then we had to get buy-in from top leadership, executive leadership, and then get into the weeds and do the real work. And I will say here that we had a coach provided by Blue Engine. Her name is Candace Fortman. Some of you may know her. She really helped us through this work because there were things I didn't think about along the way, and it really helped us get at what we were trying to do. And it's a lot about people. This, if you're asking, at least some collaborations may not be used to collaborating, let alone providing what they might think of as very sensitive data. And so the pre-work and the allies and the buy-in piece was necessary and is necessary, I think. So in the pre-work stage, we definitely made a roadmap and a timeline, which we more or less stuck to because we were asking our partners to take time out of their schedules to provide us with this data. we kind of had to be a little flexible and go with the flow a little bit on when they could do this work to get us the data. And so, but in the end, we got there. Um, so the first thing we needed to think about was like, what are we asking for? So before you even set out on the timeline, I think you want to know what you're asking for. Um, and along the way, as we set some times on our calendar and dates on our calendar, we thought about asking, we asked ourselves, who can help us with this? What don't we know? What would be the least burdensome from our partner for our partners to provide? And how can we explain this to our partners? So in building the sort of start, journey, and destination, we kind of tried to attach stakeholders within these organizations and questions to ask to each part of this journey, mainly in the start and the journey piece, because we wanted to make sure we were inclusive, we weren't overlooking things. I'll say here that in public media, we have a general idea about generally who the public media audience is. But I felt like we needed to get beyond that, and this is where this work came in because every collaboration within NPR, every city within the network is different, every community. And so that those assumptions, we don't want to make those assumptions. And you may think also that you know generally who your audience is for your partners, but I think that especially when you're about to talk to funders, they want to hear some details. They want to hear, well, how do you know that about your audience? And really, the Midwest Newsroom has no audience without our partners. And so that is why we needed to do this. Basically, our distribution channels are through our partners. And so we need to know who those folks are. So the pre-work, very important. I would say we spent a couple of months on the pre-work. Again, we kind of started this in the fall. And so we had our first kickoff session with the Blue Engine folks in September. And then in November is when we went to start to talk to people about this work and talk to people who could help us get there. So that's our pre-work. Our allies, the way that we decided to go about this was working with the general manager of KCUR, who is, again, KCUR in Kansas City is the home station of the collaborative. Sarah Morris is one of 4 executive leaders on our governing body. She holds a lot of influence. People listen to her. And we figured that if we could get Sarah to agree that KCUR would participate in this project, we could get everyone else to participate. So like I said, I am in Kansas City. I mean, I'm in St. Louis. So I went to Kansas City. And Karen is also an influencer at KCUR in and of herself. She's respected. People listen to her. So Karen helped me to set up some meetings. And we had a meeting with Sarah Morris, as well as the chief of content from KCUR, the audience specialists at KCUR, including my own Midwest Newsroom audience editor. And we said, this is what we think we need to ask for. What do you think? And it was very helpful because I started with a wish list of about 12 or 13 data points. And the KCUR audience person said, you know, I think about 6 of these are probably what's going to help you get the insight that you're looking for. And it'll probably be the least burdensome for the partners. And you can always build on it later if you want some other things. So that was really helpful. We had the meeting. We provided specifics. We asked for what we needed. What I need from you, KCUR, is to lead the way, model the way, provide us with this information so that when we go to ask the other partners, they see that our home station is behind us. They are working with us. So it was a big pivotal moment. I didn't exactly expect that they wouldn't, but I still felt like the enthusiasm that they did offer was really helpful to moving Karen and I forward in this work. And at that point, we looped in one of the audience people at KCUR, the person who really has her hands on the data. And again, our own data editor, David, who's on the Midwest Newsroom team, to help us get started on what we needed to ask for. Again, it's really important to take suggestions at this step because it is sensitive information. At least listen. If people say, well, what about this? Or that doesn't seem like that's reasonable. It's really important to listen at this point. So now you have your allies. Um, Once we had our allies at KCUR, um, every month I meet with the governing board, which we call the executive committee. And again, it's two people from NPR and senior leadership from all of our individual partners. And it's not very long. It's like a 45-minute meeting. And these are busy people. So I laid the groundwork for what we were going to ask for in an email. I said, we're going to be asking for this. And I did do a very brief deck. And so we had that meeting, very succinct and to the point. It's high level. These people, they don't need to necessarily know into the weeds. They just want to get some basic information. Um, we got questions. And I again want to ask specifically, will you give us the green light to work with your people on this? And we did that. We also then, after we got the senior leadership, then we were able to we got the green light to go to the people who would actually be doing the work, getting us the data. So that's leadership and then specific partner meetings, not on a big group meeting, but me on a meeting with the data people at St. Louis Public Radio, the audience and data people, me on a meeting with the audience and data people at Iowa Public Radio. And then following up, remember we asked you for this, just letting you know, do you have any questions? Is there anything I can provide to help you? Again, for me, this was really a lot, relying on the good graces of all the people that were involved to get this information and just being really connected to them. They're busy, reminding them what we need in a way that's not too pushy, but also assertive. This part, I think, we started asking for this in late November, early December. The holidays hit, that slowed us down. And so we really came back in January and then reminded people. And between, I think, January and March, took us a couple of months to get it all in. So you need to build in time for that, depending on what you're asking for and the resources available to your partners. And spoiler, I did not expect to have an opt-out, but we did have an opt-out. One of our partners, I'll go back, one of our partners said quite politely that they didn't have the resources to help us, and they were also in the middle of their own revamp of how they look at their audiences. And so that was disappointing. Four partners. I'm excluding NPR. This was strictly a local partners initiative. So we did not get information about one of our partners, and that was disheartening. But I did kind of take it personally at first, but I decided to check my ego there and just take them at their word that they just were not in a position to participate. So um, we got three opt-ins. And one of the three, the general manager was kind of on the fence. She felt it was a lot to ask and she wasn't sure if her people could provide it. So I said, can I just talk to your audience director and explain what it is and see if he says he can do it? And she said, okay, go ahead and do that. So that may also be part of the process. So we had an opt-out. So out of the four partners, we got three to participate. Many collaborations have far more many partners than that, 11, 10, 8. So you may not get everybody. That's why I think it is a good idea if you can, if you're about to renew or you're starting a new partnership, it might be a good time to incorporate a data sharing into an MOU of some kind so that you know right off the bat, you know, who's in, who's out, and so forth. So that's what I would recommend. We did not have an MOU for this. Like I said, we were just simply relying on getting buy-in, goodwill, trust, all those things. that are intangible, but came to came to be very important in this process. Um, okay, so we got into the weeds. Like I said, it took us about 2.5 months to get all this data from different partners. We had to ask for clarification sometimes because the data wasn't necessarily clear, or the date parameters were wonky. So there was a lot of back and forth between me primarily and each partner. Some partners, this group over here had this data, this group over here had this data, and a third person had this data. So sort of figuring out where all the data is. One partner was able to give us everything in the same spreadsheet, great different tabs for everything. It was awesome. The other partners gave us different kinds of sheets, several different sheets. And so like sort of just wrangling all this was really important. All the while knowing that I had a hard deadline because of the collaborative sustainability accelerator. I knew that I needed to get all this done because I needed to present, and I needed to collate everything, analyze everything, and present everything at the conference in Philadelphia. But also, I don't think you want to stretch it out too long because data changes, things become out of date. And so you definitely want to stick to your timeline, even if there's no external pressure. You want to give yourself an internal sort of drop dead date. So I had to do frequent follow-ups. I was constantly expressing my gratitude and appreciation, and it was genuine because everyone was super helpful, did not get a lot of pushback. People were excited to see what we would learn. And so I think the more that you can make this a shared excitement, a shared process, that's also helpful. And then just gentle reminders about deadlines. Hey, I'm going to need this by Friday, or, can I help you in any way? If you need a couple of extra days, I'm good with that, but I definitely need it by Monday. So that kind of communication, I think, when you're doing this, whoever your point person is, cannot be shy about being communicative and like knowing this is about asking people for work outside their norm and respecting that. So here's kind of what we got. The biggest thing that was disappointing was that we were not able to get the same time parameters for every station. In some cases, because they didn't start collecting that data until a certain year. In some cases, they couldn't find the data. So there were some things about the time span that some people had 4 years or 5 years of data. Great. Some people had 2 years of data. So it was really hard to do apples to apples a lot of the time, and that was very frustrating. So you may find that as well. And like I said, if you're just starting on a collaboration, or you're rebooting, or it's a good time to get this baseline data, because then you can say, hey, listen, in a year, we're going to be coming back to ask you for these 5 things. So can you please start tracking that now? And here's some tools, because we got different things all over the place. So we asked for the top content verticals, and then people had different definitions for verticals. Some call them topics, some call them verticals, some call them some other thing. And some stations one station had like, I don't know, 9 or 10 verticals or topics. One had 6. There were some in common, like everyone had government and politics. One partner has a gardening thing. Nobody else has that. One partner has a history culture. Nobody else has that. So this was interesting to try to wrangle. We asked for streaming numbers, again, different time parameters from different partners. We asked for podcast subscriptions and podcast downloads. Once again, not all the same data there. Membership was the best area that we got what we needed because we went with whatever the latest membership number was as of spring of 2026. And membership in public media, as you probably know, means basically someone has given money to the station. It might be $10, it might be $1,000. So I didn't get that data, but I did get the raw numbers of where members are. And we use that as a proxy for listenership because if you don't know, radio ratings, which are supposed to count radio listenership, are very faulty and flawed, and we didn't feel like we could rely on that. But we do know that membership means you're a highly engaged person. You probably listen a few times a week. You may listen to the podcast every day, the morning podcast. You probably have the app, or you go online and you're subscribed to newsletters. So membership was really interesting, and we were able to map that. That's very cool. We got zip codes, membership zip codes, to map where the members are. And that was really eye-opening and really helpful. So that was the best sort of data point that we got that was the most apples to apples and really helped us to see a lot about the people who are super engaged with our partners, the people who are likely hearing the Midwest Newsroom's content and reading our content. That was key, and that was big. We also looked at newsletters, newsletter opens, newsletter subscriptions, different time parameters, but interesting. And then every station has different kinds of newsletters. So we were mostly looking at newsletters that definitely pertain to news, not entertainment, not gardening, for example, not history or entertainment or culture. And then for events, only 2 of our partners had the events data. And again, they were in different time. For one partner, we got 1 year. For the other partner, we got 3 or 4 years. And we thought this would be really helpful just to see what kinds of events were the most engaging. And so it was interesting and I think telling. But again, it was only 2 of the partners. So we only started with 3, and then with the events, we only got 2 partners to give us that that data. But so that's what we asked for, 6 things, and that's what we got. And again, I think you want to make it as basic and straightforward as you can with the partners, and know that at least initially, until you get some kind of a baseline, the data may come in kind of wonky and different, and you may have to work around that. So that's what we asked for, and that's what we got. Challenges. As I said, we didn't get 100% participation. There were data differences across the collaboration. It was hard to draw broad conclusions because of the data differences. We did find some interesting things and that I think are going to be helpful, but I did not feel comfortable like we had enough data that was comparable to say this is A, B, and C conclusively. So that was a bit challenging. And then the challenge then becomes, so what? So you did all this, now what? So what did I do with it? We wrote a report, and our data journalist, Daniel, did a great job of basically taking the data that was provided and doing graphics. So the report was not just a bunch of words. We had data visualizations showing, for example, the maps of the membership, showing the streaming trends, newsletter trends. We even did a thing that showed over time podcast downloads and subscriptions. And you could see, for example, with one podcast that the Midwest Newsroom worked on in Iowa, you could see exactly where the spike happened because that podcast happened like right before the election, and you saw that spike. So that was really interesting to see. So I wrote this report. Before I sent it out, I shared it back to the people who had given me the data and said, is this accurate? Are these Are these points that I'm highlighting true based on what you provided me? So that's what I did before I shared the document with executive leadership. I shared it back to the people who actually helped me do the work. What's in the report? An overview, why we're doing this, what we hope to get from it. I broke down each partner into a section to summarize and provide some highlights of each partner. We had a whole section with the data visualizations. We had a conclusion section, which I was really careful to explain why we weren't drawing any broad inferences because the data was so different and limited. And then what's next, and providing suggestions for what this can be used for, and what I'm going to be using it for, frankly. Just last week, I presented, so I shared this out to the executive leadership and the development leadership across the partnership, as well as with NPR. Last week, I presented the results to the development leads across the collaborative, and also some folks from NPR. We talked about it. And, we kind of, a couple of really interesting things came up about how to use this information. And this is the first time they're seeing each other's audience information. And again, one of the partners who was on the meeting did not take part, but we did share that information with her as well, because we all felt it was important that this partner that could not participate still was part of the information download, if you will. So that's kind of the overview of this effort. Before I close out the presentation, is there any slide that anybody would like me to go back to?
Holly, there is a question in the chat from Liza. She asked if the report that you did contained specific recommendations on how to continue to standardize data gathering and then the subsequent presentation.
It did not, but that's a very good idea. We are also at a crossroads because our grant, our 2 buckets of money run out next year. And so there's a lot of fish that I'm frying at the moment. But certainly I think that that would be something that I would probably raise with the executive committee and say, hey, I'm being optimistic that we're going to get funding. And when we sign a new MOU, let's put that in, and let's make sure that, so now we have a baseline. Let's make sure that we keep doing this because it benefits everybody. And by the way, that data that I gathered, we haven't shared it outside of the family. People are very sensitive to that. And I think it's important to assure your partners that you're not going to write a blog about it and share all their data. But yes, Liza, that's a very important piece, because now that we've done this, we can build on it.
Kate has a question.
Hi, Holly. You talk about, thank you for all of that. That was really helpful. And I was like, oh yeah, we should all do that at the beginning. This is brilliant. You talk about sharing it with the development team last week. Did you see this? And it came up as a sustainability point, right? So this was really intended to drive some fundraising potentially. Is audience growth a content goal of the collaboratives also? And once you got the data, do you see it as more? I was really interested in it in an audience growth perspective, almost more than in a development perspective. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So when we started, like I said, we were really thinking about, well, first of all, when we were accepted to this collaboration, this sustainability accelerator, Karen and I were like, okay, they're going to tell us how to rake in the money. Woo, that was the first thought. And then they told us at the first session, this is not about raking in the money. This is more fundamental than that. So that was really interesting. But like I said, Kate, this thing started in the fall of last year, and about the December of last year, we knew that we were going to be doing some changes and reorganization to the way that we look at our content. And so it became a bonus for that as well. And so audience growth, it's not a deliverable of mine, but to me, it's sort of, as managing editor, at least not now, but to me, it's sort of part and parcel of what we need to do, and that we know that our audience is finite. However, we also know that we haven't reached the potential of even that sort of circle of people who would be interested in public media in general and this work in particular. I think the NPR calls it the adjacent audience. So you got your audience, then there's those people who you could get. And so to me, like, what are the opportunities to get that adjacent audience through our work? And all of our three out of our four partners all have audience people, like specialists who do this work. And so this is another great thing that came out of this project was my relationship building with them. Because, and then we did our own audience editor is a new position that I advocated for as well. So all of this goes into like, can we put together a real strategy for audience development? Because we don't have that. Like when the Midwest Newsroom was conceived, it was really focusing, the MOU was very basic, the deliverables were very, very basic. There were it was basically about the content. Let's do this content. Now we've matured and it's like, okay, we're doing this content. Is it getting to the people that we needed to get to? For example, a lot of funders and also public media stations are wanting to reach communities in suburban and rural and sort of in between audiences. But when we looked at our data, those people are not currently members, right? When we looked at our mapping, is it worthwhile to try to get them to be our people? Or do we double down within the areas that we know people already are listening and get to that adjacent audience, right? So that's really interesting to me. A pet peeve of mine is doing journalism about people who never get the journalism. They don't get that journalism. And so to me, for looking at where our membership is, we know there's adjacent audience already existing in those places like college towns, right? We got a lot of college towns and boy, their people are there, but we bet we could do better, right? We could do better in those places in terms of audience development. Another thing that we have done in terms of getting a new audience is, and this I just did without asking permission, and so far nobody has said not do it, is we give away our stories to anybody who wants to republish them. So we have again, our audience editor has a distro list. We get published our digital stories were picked up by 2 TV stations in Nebraska a couple of weeks ago. We have guidelines. We use Creative Commons licensing. Those organizations will not give us their data, understandably, but we can get a sense of what we might be benefiting from by the size of their reach and where they are. We get little papers in Kansas republishing us. The Nebraska Examiner, which is a state's newsroom outlet, republishes us on a regular basis. We've been in the Lincoln and the Omaha dailies. And so this is, to me, really important because even if we get to the adjacent audience in public media, we still have to keep growing. So where else can we be developing audience? So all of that is part of the equation. That's a long answer, Kate, but yeah. Joe,
Yeah, my hand is up. Liza and Kate hit on the two that I really wanted to ask, but as you were talking, especially about the content sharing, it triggered my fight or flight because we also have struggled with that as well. And I'm wondering, have you been able to solve the age-old question of how the heck do you track who is republishing and sharing it without a waterfall of Google News alerts and manual searches? What is that like, especially with your expertise in data collection and preservation? I would imagine that you probably have some good insight on how to track that.
Yeah, so our data editor, our audience editor, David, fell upon a tool called Meltwater. It is not free. But KCUR, which is our home station, either is in some kind of a free trial or was grandfathered into a free or cheap version of it, Meltwater. It even picks up radio mentions. So like most of our republication on with the audio is pretty much within the public media realm, because a lot of places cannot put on the air a 4-minute news feature. So our republication is primarily in print publications or digital publications. So we can but we also sometimes get mentioned in other ways. There's a conservative talk show in Missouri that has brought up our stories a few times, not in flattering ways, but we would never know that without Meltwater picking that up and saying, "Oh, you were discussed. The Midwest Newsroom was discussed on the Joe and Carl's show," or whatever it's called. So that's really cool. Let me look at that link you shared, Meltwater. It's an AI sort of thing. I am not an expert on it at all, but our data journalist is. Yeah, that looks like it, Joe. Our data journalist is. There's also something called Infogee, which is another type of scraping tool that can tell you where you show up. So it's great because there are places that we would not know because yeah, maybe that's why. But we, for
I'm
some
always
reason,
suspicious of any SaaS product that lists even their starter price as contact the salespeople. That
yes,
always
yes,
sends me running.
yes.
So I don't know if you know or if you can share, but what's the general price range? Because I know that
I'll
there's
need to
the
ask. I need to
okay.
ask because it doesn't come out of my budget. So I'm like, hey, bring it on. Um, so that's been great. And then every month, at the end of the month, David, our audience editor, puts together a report. And we share that within the team and with some people at NPR and with our partners that shows like how our core partners use the story and what their digital engagement was on each station. And then we go to social, we look at that. Then we go to Meltwater, look at that, and it gives us a nice picture of what's going on with our content. So that's how we do that. I can try to find out what the Meltwater thing is. All I know is that KCUR has some kind of deal. And because otherwise I don't think it would be something that we could probably afford. And I don't know how long it's going to last for, but it's been tremendous. And it's just been a really it even can tell you a little bit about like sentiment around your stories and things like that. Like, what are people talking about with affordability? Here's some of the sentiment out there that's happening. So anyway, it's really cool. And then, oh, but David also manually, like we have a weekly story now, and stations have a finite amount of time to air it and use it until another story comes along. So David is in contact with the folks at each partner, and we only have 4. So he can do that manually. Hey, did you use the story? Are you using the story? In case I missed it. Any questions about it? Any concerns? So we have that manual thing going on as well. And then if other NPR stations outside our partnership pick it up, either Meltwater will give us that. I also do have a Google alert just for kicks on my own Gmail for the Midwest Newsroom. So so it's a combo, but we have some artificial intelligence helping us to shortcut that process. Kathy.
Hi, I'm in Wichita, and I've talked with a couple of our partners previously about doing this, and 2 of them who have access to a lot of data are not receptive to it. But here's what I'm wondering about. We're starting a new topic right now. Would there be value in just focusing in data on the topic rather than going into everything? Would there be some value in that?
I think so because A, it's finite and doesn't make people nervous. And B, it can maybe make the case for more data later, right? If you do it in a way that is narrow, and sort of have this sort of collaborative approach to how you do it, you're constantly giving updates, you're transparent, you're sharing back your learnings, then you might be able to ask for something else later. But I also think that just from for the people who are in your group who are nerds about efficiency and results and measurability, again, you can sell them on that. Like, we're trying this new subject matter. Shouldn't we figure out if audiences, is it resonating with audiences? We're putting in the effort. You know, is the return on effort for this kind of work justified by the audience? So I think absolutely, I think it might be a great way to start this conversation with partners who may be hesitant. Is like, can we just do this one little piece?
Mhm.
And here's how long we're going to do it for, and then we'll see what we get. I think it's
like
a
it.
great idea.
Thank you.
Kathy, may I ask, you mentioned a couple of partners that are reluctant in sharing that data. Is that a because they feel it's proprietary information? Is it a resource thing? We don't have the time. I'm just trying to figure out, how the hub can address, where we try to fill gaps and come up with templates and MOUs and that sort of thing. So what's their feedback about that?
So what I hear from the Wichita Eagle is our data is so complicated and so in depth and everything that they can't translate it for us. And one of our partners it's more proprietary. They want to hold things close. They don't want us they feel there's a lot of competition in sharing information. And then some of our partners are really small. There's like the Community Voice, which is it's a print publication, but there's some online that serves the African American community. And then there's Planeta Venus, which serves the Latino community. They probably have some data, but it's not going to be expansive data. But so that's why I was kind of thinking we're kicking off our new topic this month, or actually in September, adult literacy. And so I thought I could probably approach it that way and at least make some headway. And that was something that we talked about when we did our strategic plan with Mark, as well as getting that data. So
I was thinking, if you keep it super simple, the
mhm.
Wichita Eagle cannot tell you that, oh, I can't give you page views on our stories. That's too complicated. I mean, I really think that that is a simple ask. Like, if you did something like page views, time on page, that's a great one.
Yeah.
Time on the page views, and maybe one other thing, like 3 things. And for the partners that are really small, maybe help them find some very simple tools for Google Analytics or something that can help them do that, and just start simple, and tell the Wichita paper, hey, we don't need, all the stuff that you have. We just need these 3 things,
Yeah.
and start there. I think it's a great time to do that. I see a question from Shannon. Talk through a little bit more about your thought process on how you forged ahead with content focus and strategy when the data you captured was incomplete. Yeah. So welcome to my life. Welcome to the life of the collaborative that covers 4 states that are huge, or big, vast, and varied. And that we're never used to collaborating before. Um, Luckily, everyone's pretty collegial. It is the Midwest. There's a lot of goodwill. So when we started, it was sort of a free-for-all, because there were no sort of content pillars, there were no beats, it was just do investigative journalism. So, but we also had a lot of freedom. So we kind of started covering what we thought would be interesting based on what's happening in the national and the regional conversation. And we landed on some topics that we thought had very high engagement, even though we only knew about a few of our partners. And this is way back. Then we were able to we do get monthly data from this 4th partner that didn't participate. So we are much better shape now for the past 2 years. So on a monthly basis, we have sight on page views, uniques, and time on page for all 4 partners. So we started to sort of hone in on some things that really resonate. Issues around housing are big. Issues around education and health are big. Immigration, big. And now data centers, big. So our content strategy has sort of become something like the things that we know. There's a huge sort of overlapping multiple Venn diagram, right? Things we know from the limited data that we have, past this most recent data. Things we know are really engaging on our social media platforms, Things that our partners think are important, right? That's a big one. Sometimes it doesn't matter what the data says. The partners want this, right? And so that's what we need to work in. And then the things that our people have expertise in, right? And so it's a very unscientific collaboration. And then also like, oh, that's really important. Like right now, everyone's talking about flock cameras in our region, right? We stopped doing a lot of criminal justice work because all of our partners were doing that in their local communities, and it didn't really resonate a lot with what we found, at least basically. However, now it's becoming a thing with immigration, with privacy, with AI, with there's a lot of things happening now, and it's a loud constituency out there, a highly engaging topic. So we actually are doing a story. Our St. Louis reporter is going to be doing a story with an angle that hasn't been covered in our region, in partnership with the St. Louis Public Radio reporter. And that was a request from our partner. Our partner said, we want a story about flock cameras. One thing that was kind of a no-brainer and we knew was going to have to be part of our content strategy back in late 2023, no, January 20, no, wait, late 2024, after Trump won, we convened and talked a lot about immigration, and that nobody in the collaborative had an immigration beat or beat that covers people in immigrant communities. And so we had the opportunity with our news fellowship. We have a reporting fellowship that lasts for 12 months. We decided to make that an immigration reporting fellowship. So that we decided it's a no-brainer. All the evidence is coming at us that this is going to be a big deal. We're going to dedicate resources to a beat, even though otherwise we don't really have beats. And so right now our content mix is that sort of unscientific mix of data, what partners want, what we think is people are talking about based on social media, and what our expertise is. We also just hired someone who happens to have really deep expertise in healthcare coverage, healthcare reporting. We're leaning into it. We're going to lean into that. So that's kind of Shannon and my long answer. It's very unscientific and very wobbly, but collaboration is wobbly. If you haven't figured it out, I'm here to tell you it can be wobbly.
Thank you, Holly. I appreciate that. Sorry, my camera's off. That's a very busy coffee shop. No, but I appreciate that. And I think also something you said resonated too, which is just like having the sort of freedom and risk taking across the collaborative to meet those needs and sort of fill those gaps.
Luckily, we've had a lot of freedom and sort of experimentation. Not all successful, but measurable. And okay, that didn't work out. We're going to try something else. And coming to a place where at the bottom, I want my team to feel like they're doing meaningful work, and I want to serve the audience. And so that's really what I try to keep in mind. You're welcome. I could talk for another hour. I know we don't have time, but I love to talk about this stuff. So
Yeah, this has been really helpful, Holly. I think it's for the established collaboratives who are thinking about, well, we really need to get some data and how it can help us. Obviously, if you're a brand new collaborative starting out, the best time to set the stage for getting data is in the MOU. It's a little harder to go back and, do an addendum or convince people to share that information. And but you've highlighted some of the ways you went about it, and you were realistic about the challenges you had, and what you did to work around it. And the hub would like to be able to continue this kind of a conversation, we have a library of resources that includes MOUs. We're looking at those now to particularly around two topics to integrate. Number one is the AI usage and how collaboratives will or will not use AI and what that looks like. Is that more top of mind? And also data sharing and getting that clause, that part into the MOU before you people sign the MOU, so they have those expectations. Making it a lot easier. So thank you for the great presentation and your great participation in the Sustainability Accelerator. To everybody else, the center published a Q&A with Holly. Joe dropped that in the chat. And we will send the recording of this webinar along with Holly's slides. If you have additional questions, I can share Holly's contact information. You're, of course, welcome to reach out to us at the Hub for this or any other of your needs, from templates to impact tracking to all kinds of things. We're here to help you out. And also, likewise, if you have ideas for topics of our monthly webinars, which are free and open to everyone, please let me know what they are. We're always looking for what we can do, that what project managers and what collaboratives need, not necessarily what they think we need. And next month's will be about how student journalists can be part of collaboratives. So look forward to that information. Thank you all.
And I'm happy to talk to anybody. So Kate knows I could talk for a long period of time. So
thank you, Holly. Appreciate your time.